Welcome, everybody, back to the Friar Talk podcast and YouTube channel. For today's episode, we're going to be quickly going over our early impressions on the 2022 San Diego Padres. Obviously, we're a series into the year. This doesn't mean too much, but really just talking about some of the adjustments that we've seen some players make, how they're trending, if they're trending up, if they're trending down. If you guys look at the thumbnail, we have Jerks and Profar, we have Will Myers. Obviously, after the first series, both of those guys are going in very opposite directions than I think what a lot of people expected. I mean, a lot of people are down on Will Myers, so maybe not, but Jerks and Profar, definitely a huge surprise there. So we wanted to just get like our quick thoughts out on some of these guys, talk about the guys that we're a little bit more confident in, maybe just seeing their approaches at the plate, seeing some of the adjustments they've made, and maybe just some like drastic differences in their stat line this year than, and granted, it's 4 games, but this year compared to previous seasons and, what their approaches look like, if anything like that's different. So with that said, Chase, who's really caught your eye early on this season?
I think I'm going to go with the obvious answer here, and that's Profar. I mean, you look back at the last couple seasons, Profar maybe had a handful of home runs each year, and he already has 2 this year. I mean, one of them was the no doubt ground slam, which he got a hold of. And, the first one, it was a wall scraper, but it still went a pretty long way. I mean, we look at it and you're like, where did this come from? Because the Profar we know couldn't hit for power, but seeing him hit from the right side of the plate, he showcasing his power all right. It's like, okay, I guess as long as we keep him hitting on the right side of the plate, not the left side, you know what? I'm okay with him being an everyday player. He's got the power to go with it. He hasn't been that bad in the left, though it appears, as soon as we get into usually the 7th, or I should say the 8th or 9th inning, he does get switched out for Azakar. So I guess they still don't really trust his defense that late into games, which is understandable. But yeah, Profar has been one of the guys that's just kind of been lighting it up, and you have to give him props for that.
Yeah, man, Profar is definitely a fair answer, and that's somebody that I didn't hate Profar. I actually really like Profar, but it's also worth noting that like even though I like him, I can acknowledge that going into the season, I was not high on him at all. I thought he was like a really below average left fielder. And I thought, oh, we can't go into the season with this guy. But of course, only 4 games in. I really don't expect this to continue for Profar, but we need somebody to have a hot hand up until Fernando comes back. And it doesn't have to be him the rest of the rest of the way up until June. We just need somebody to do it up until then. And I feel like that'll be alternating the hot hand. But yeah, he had a really good series. Hit two bombs, brought in a lot of RBIs. Granted, 4 games into the season, he's one of the guys that's up on the top of the home run list in the league. But power that we haven't seen. I never seen him hit a ball that far. That grand slam was like, it was a no doubter. The left fielder barely moved, I felt like. So a lot of props to Jerks and Profar. Another guy to talk about, Jorge Alfaro. He's mashing the ball right now. I feel like I kind of didn't believe it, like especially out of spring training, because you don't really buy stock into somebody that you haven't really heard much of before. But when you dig a little deeper, you look into his old scouting reports and his baseball savant pages, you could see that this guy actually hits the ball really hard. So I don't think it's going to be a fluke. I expect it to, I think it's going to pan out, but he's hitting the ball really hard, and I expect that to continue. Also, you could mention Luke Voit, got on base a lot, even though it doesn't show in his average. His on base percentage is probably really high. I don't have the numbers, but there were definitely a couple standouts. You can't go, you can't make one of these episodes without mentioning the pitching. Pitching was fantastic. Big shout out to Bill Chrisman, man. That was somebody like we need to give as a fan base. That's somebody that we need to give more props to, man, because it seems like whenever we need somebody to come out of the bullpen and be ready on basically on short notice, on very short notice, he's always ready. So really like that Nabil Chrisman went out there and did his thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's consistently been able to do that. He just comes in, eats up innings, and has around a 3 ERA while doing so, which is huge. And he was someone that Ryan, you guys know Ryan has been a guest on the show many times. He brought him up to us before last season, and we're like, all right, man, like, sure, this guy in the Bill Chrismat's going to be this long. And he's like, Ryan was like, yeah, he's going to be a long reliever. He's going to be really, really good. And we're like, all right, dude, really, really good. That might be too much. No, he's been really, really good. And he showed that again last night. And I think what you see is he doesn't throw with a ton of velocity, but he hits his spots. He has a ton of movement on his pitches, and guys look completely lost at the plate. Every once in a while, a guy will completely barrel one, but most of the time they can't even hit out of the park because there's so much movement that they just gap it. And so he ends up getting out of the situation, maybe leaves the guy on, but he's been fantastic. So great guy to bring up. Jerks and Profar, Jorge Alfaro, I was definitely going to bring them up. You brought up Luke Voit, Isaac. So Luke Voit actually right now, his on-base percentage is 529. He has 7 walks, I think, in 15 at-bats. No, sorry, 13 at-bats. So really, or sorry, yeah. 7, yeah, I think it's something like that. But he has a bunch of walks. He has 7 walks already. So we look into that. He's balling out. I'll say a couple other guys that I'll bring up. Maybe stat line aren't as impressive. Well, I guess Austin Nola's stat line is impressive. He's hitting 400 right now. But more for Nola, it's about, hey, this guy's a legit contact hitter. And we've been talking about Nola a lot just because we talked about, removing the trade from him, because even if he balls out this year, the trade's still probably not going to be worth it. I'd find it really hard for him to live up to like what the Padres gave up. But he looks really good, and he's been hitting 1, 2. He's a legit 2-hitter. Like, he can be a 2-hitter on this team. He can be a table setter for Machado, Tatis, Voit, Cronenworth, all those guys. He can be that kind of guy. He's hitting 400 right now. He's had a couple of really clutch hits. He had the sack fly yesterday. So he's been a guy that looked really good. Another guy I want to bring up, and this guy's only hitting 200 right now, but I really like the way his approach has looked, and that's Ha-seong Kim. First of all, defensively, we know this guy's one of the best in the game. In terms of infielders, he is one of the best defensive infielders in the sport. However, at the plate last year, he struggled mightily. He barely had over a 600 OPS, didn't flash that much power, really struggled, couldn't catch up to velocity. He feels so much more in control of his at-bats than he did last year, because a lot of times last year, it felt like he'd come up and it'd be a 3 or 4 pitch at-bat, and he would just get absolutely gassed. He doesn't look like that this year. The ball that he drove into, was it right center for the triple? That ball was absolutely destroyed. And he went opposite field with it. So I think when we're looking into Ha-seong Kim, I think most of it is, how does he look at each plate appearance? And the big question for him and for CJ Abrams is going to be, are these guys going to get consistent at bats? We'll see kind of how that plays out. But in terms of the positive guys, I think you got to bring up him, even though maybe the numbers don't look that crazy, but it's more about what are his numbers going to look like in a month? Because I think they're going to look significantly better than they did last year. And I mean, that could be huge, because if he forces his way into the infield, like, then you have, we've talked about before, you have a good problem. You have too many guys, and maybe someone gets moved from this infield. Maybe it is him. And I don't really want him to get moved at all. I feel like Ha-seong Kim is like one of the coolest Padres. Like, he's just like, outside of Fernando, that dude's probably the guy that everyone gets as hyped as like ever for. I mean, guys know the Kim chants at Petco Park. Like, those are amazing. When he hit the late home run, the bottom of the 8th last year, the crowd went absolutely nuts. Like, we want to see that. We want to see Ha-seong Kim absolutely just destroy baseballs this year. And early on, he's done that. If we're switching gears a little bit, changing to who's underwhelmed, so there's probably 2 guys. Chase, you want to lead off the first one?
Well, before we get into this, I think there's another person that we have to mention who we haven't mentioned. That's Eric Hosmer. As much flack as we give him, he has done really well the first 4 games. He usually does really well in April, so hopefully he continues to do this, because we definitely need his bat to continue to be hot while Fernando's out. So props to him. He's played a pretty good first base so far. Haven't seen anything that I could hate. He's picked the balls when he needed to. He's played some good defense, so props to that guy. And to move on to the next segment, I know you guys are going to want me to say it. It's Will Myers. He's definitely, he's struggled at the plate. I mean, he looks defeated after some of his at-bats. I remember opening day when he struck out, I think was with the bases loaded. He went back to right field. Man, he just didn't look like he was having fun out there. And he's definitely one of those guys that's been struggling. You can see it. He has 1 hit. I think it was a single. He's maybe walked once and then struck out basically the rest of the time. It hasn't been very pretty for him, at least these first 4 games.
Yeah, he actually did get 1 more hit down the line, the third baseline. So I was really excited when I saw that. because I mean, you guys know I'm probably the biggest Will Myers hater, but I don't like actually despise the guy. Going back to Eric Hosmer, you're absolutely right. Eric Hosmer has been fantastic. We need April Hosmer to stick around for as long as possible. Now back to Will Myers. My guy has a 44% strikeout percentage right now against guys that threw maximum 95. And I was like, it just doesn't feel like anything's changed. It's like not a surprise to me because I feel like that's been Will Myers' his like whole career, right? Outside of 2016 and 2020 where he was baller, I feel like this has just been it's just the same thing. And obviously this is a lot worse. This year is a lot worse. I think his strikeout percentage. I was looking at it right now on Fangraphs. Let me just pull it up again if I still have it. His highest is 34%. So he's 9% higher than or 10% higher than usual. So that's going to go down. I fully believe that's going to go down. But he's not very encouraging right now. His approach at the plate isn't very good. It was kind of the same as spring training. People say he didn't have a good spring training. Do I think he'll come around? Yeah, I do think he's going to come around. I mean, the guy always has this kind of streak where he goes ballistic for a little while before cooling down again. So we're going to need one of those here soon, especially in this series against the Giants. I mean, we need somebody to pull through because this Giants team is still pretty good. So this whole lineup is going to have to come through, and hopefully he's able to turn the tides this time, man, because we're all so reliant on Will Myers against the guys like Madison Bumgarner, where his career shows he's dominant against those guys. Like he does really good at Chase Field and against Madison Bumgarner off lefties. But we just didn't see that this past series. So hopefully it's just kind of like a blip instead of like, this is the worst Will Myers we've seen. Because as of right now, it's the latter.
Yeah, he's been awful to start the year. And like we said, this is 4 games in, so don't want to jump the gun on this stuff. I will say one thing for Will Myers, and that is that while Will Myers is horribly inconsistent throughout the duration of a season, his year-by-year numbers are relatively the exact same every single season. He's basically a 250 hitter. He has a 460 slugging percentage, and he has about a 750 to like 760 like 740 to like 770 OPS. And he's pretty much there every year, and he strikes out about 160 times. That's pretty much who he is. If he was a great defender, he'd be a pretty valuable player. He's not a great defender. He's average at best. Like he's just solid. He is an average MLB player, and the problem with Will Myers is that he makes $20 million, and he is extremely aggravating to watch when there are guys on base. What I would recommend for the Will Myers situation is, why don't we hit him really low in the lineup? Why don't we not hit him at 5 and 6 when you know that there are going to be a bunch of guys on base and it's going to be 1 or 2 outs and he's going to come up and there's going to be a fastball right down the middle and he's going to swing and a miss and everyone that's a Padres fan is going to lose their mind, because that's what happens consistently. I still think he can have some value, but I just don't think we can't count on this dude to be a 5 or 6 hitter, unless he gets hot. When he gets hot, yeah, put him up there. Let him hit early, higher in the lineup. But when he's struggling like this, we know that he's probably going to struggle for a while until he breaks out of it and kind of gets out of his slump. But he's been in a slump throughout spring training. I was hoping that was just kind of like, oh yeah, he's spring training, working on some stuff. But right now Will Myers looks like the inconsistent guy that we've seen in the past. So definitely think that he's the guy that struggled most. One guy I'll bring up before we take off out of here, Trent Grisham. Trent Grisham has awful numbers right now. I don't know how to feel about it, because I feel like, he's kind of a similar guy in terms of how Will Myers is super up and down. So is Trent. And it feels like he's just been a goose egg at the top of the lineup, which really sucks. But hopefully he gets it going. But his numbers are pretty bad. I don't even think he has a 400 OPS. Yeah, he has a 398 OPS right now. That's so bad. But another guy, it's super early on in the year. He does walk a lot, but I think he's went over for 2 times leading off already throughout this season. So that's pretty brutal. So definitely need him to step up. The outfield's the big question marks. That's what we've kind of thought for a while now. But hopefully these guys get it together. But I don't know. I think it is concerning. But I do think that Will Myers and Trent Grisham will come back to the median. I don't think they're going to be breakout players necessarily. Maybe Grisham could. I don't think Myers will be, but we'll see how it plays out. But I don't know. Early on, these guys are definitely struggling a lot. But good thing we've had Jerkson completely ball out in left field. Hosmer has been destroying the baseball. Chase, I don't know how we didn't mention him. Thank you for catching that, because he's hitting like 500 right now, and he's just been an RBI machine. So props to him. Hopefully he keeps that up. And he hasn't made any errors on defense. So hopefully that stays consistent as well. I do like that they are resting him a little bit, not playing him against lefties all the time. I think that's a good strategy to do with him. And I saw some people talking about it. I mean, he's getting older. What if giving him some rest days actually kind of improves him? I think it's something that's fair to bring up, and hopefully that's the case. But if he gets into baseball like this, I mean, that's a really, really good sign for the Padres. So hopefully that's the case as well. But pitching, amazing. We didn't get too much into it. I think we expected the pitching to be really dominant. 2 no-hit starts to start the year wasn't exactly what we were thinking. That's pretty ridiculous. But, I mean, overall, good series winning against the Diamondbacks. I think the early impressions are positive. But there are a couple guys that are going to need to pick it up, and I think they're going to. Maybe some of the bats will die down a little bit, but I think this typically low-scoring Padre team able to scrap out wins late in games, that's what we're going to have to see. We're going to have to see a lot of games like the Saturday game where it's 2-2, and then in the 8th you get 2 runs, and then the 9th you get that insurance run, and you end up closing that game out. So I don't know. I think that's where I'm at with this team, though. I think that we're going to see if they make – I don't think they're going to make any moves for a while at least. But a couple of the guys that you're kind of counting on having big years are doing well. And if Myers and Grisham are able to do that as well, I mean, Padres will be in a great spot. But with all that said, thank you guys for listening. We are posting this right before Monday night's game against the Giants. So if you're listening before Monday night, hopefully the Padres win. If you're listening after Monday night, hopefully you're listening after a Padres victory on Monday. But with all that said, thank you guys for listening, and we'll be talking Padres baseball tomorrow.